Welcome to your favorite podcast for women from now to next, the podcast where we dive into the sticky floors that hold us back from breaking through glass ceilings. I'm your host, Erica Rooney, and today I have Lauryn with me. And Lauryn is an HR consultant that runs her own consulting firm called People First HR Consulting. She works primarily with small to mid-sized businesses, think early to mid-stage startups, and she helps them develop their HR function and really is that strategic HR partner and fractional HR leader. She takes the people first approach. Now, outside of work, she is a long distance runner, which I love, an avid outdoors woman who loves spending time with her husband and her dog. So Lauryn, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Erica.
Awesome. So Lauryn, I would love to kick off today's podcast. Tell me a little bit about you, how you got to where you are. I mean, owning your own HR consulting firm, I think is so awesome and very empowering. So I'd like to kind of hear the story about how you got there.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's so good to talk to you again. So I got into HR after college. I majored in anthropology and sociology. So I wanted to find a field that I could translate the social sciences to and still make money because that was essential. Staying in academia was not going to earn me any money. So I found HR and I started off at a tech startup and built out their HR function, really accelerated quickly as an HR business partner, and then moved on to a marketing agency, became a senior HR associate, and built out the HR function for another startup after that, and then transitioned into HR consulting. So it was kind of funny. It started with like acquaintance who needed some on the side HR help, very part-time, pre-pandemic. And so I was like, yeah, I work, I know, this is pre-pandemic. They were like, oh, just a few hours. And I was like, sure thing. Like, I'll help you get your HR function started and compliant. This was back in San Diego. And then the pandemic happened and they were like, as every HR professional and like any other professional, the world of work just like completely transformed. So throughout 2020, my capacity for the clients just increased. And then I left my full-time job and started consulting.
Wow. That's awesome. Number one, that the opportunity was there, but number two, really that you saw it and you seized upon it, even though you had no idea what it would turn into.
Totally. Yeah.
I think that's really cool. So I think when you start your own consulting firm, and I have not done that, so you can tell me if I'm right, wrong, or indifferent. I just imagine so many sticky floor moments like leading up to that. And then even so many more sticky floor moments kind of when you're in it. What would you say has been like the biggest sticky floor moment that you've had to work through?
That's a great question. Well, there's probably 1,000 to be honest, but I think I think we all struggle with imposter syndrome. And I think like more so as women in the workplace, but I think the thing that comes to mind, the sticky floor scenario, is that when I started matching with new clients, right, and like trying to fill this need for HR that they needed, I was being propelled to a very like senior position, like someone to focus on HR strategy, build and lead that function. And oftentimes I would get stuck being like, I am not experienced enough for this, or I am not the right one for this, or what am I doing wrong, or I do not have the right skills for this, even though the clients and the senior leadership saw it in me. And so a lot of times I was just being held back because I was scared to really step into the role of HR leader and thought partner and consultant. I think too that some of my experiences prior to going into consulting, I was often not given a lot of autonomy in my role, and also held back a lot. And there was a lot of sticky floors from the corporate side that I think I just got used to being stuck on. And so even though that may not have existed in some of my consulting opportunities, I was still operating from that point of view.
That's a really, I think, good point to make, because if you are in a corporate or a corporation, or if you have like a people leader that is very much a micromanager of like, this is what I want you to do, and I want you to do it by following steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like you're going to come in, you're going to rock it out. You're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus having the type of manager that is empowering you and giving you the autonomy to do it your own way. You know, I actually was listening to some podcast and they were talking about Jeff Bezos from Amazon.
Yeah.
And they said he is like dead set on the vision. Like he knows down to the T what he wants the vision to look like, but he is loose on the execution because he lets his people who are experts, who they hired to do the job, get there. And I was like, God, like we need all of our managers to be like that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. That's so interesting. I'm happy you shared that with me, because some of the most inspiring and effective leaders I've worked with, especially like the 2 that I'm thinking about in my prior corporate roles, were exactly like that. Like one of the VPs from the tech startup I got my HR career kind of started at, I still am in touch with her a little bit today, but she was a really empowering woman in the workplace. And she had that. She was clear on the vision for her department, and then trusted her team and delegated and let them have complete autonomy as long as they had that vision. So it's crazy to hear that like someone as significant as the head of Amazon has that too. And seeing her execute that in one of my roles, like kind of inspired me to think that way as well.
Yeah. And it allows you the space to make mistakes, but also to trust yourself, right? Like you are under the guidance of somebody else, under the care of someone else. It's allowing you to make those little baby steps, you know, learn to trust yourself that, hey, my instincts are right, rather than like in a big, huge faux pas way, you know? And to speak to what you just said, I remember one of my very first HR leaders. It was like when I was first in HR, and like you said, I was sure that they were going to find out I had like 0 experience in like X stage, right? Yeah. But an employee had come to me with an issue or something like that, and I went to her because I was like, I don't know what to do, and I explained the situation to her, and she just said to me, you know, in the security of her office, just me and her, like, well, what would you do? You know, she didn't just tell me the answer. She didn't give it to me. She made me actually think through it. And, you know, I gave my answer, and then she's like, okay, now what if this happens? And she kind of like walked me through the different scenarios, but had me driving the bus essentially, you know, because in HR, things can go so many different ways. Like there's no, if you do A, it leads to B, C, D, right? Like it could fly off the handle. You have to think through all the scenarios. And just that one interaction, I remember so like specifically, and that's how like I try now to lead my team, is because it was such a learning moment for me. You know, it didn't matter if I answered it wrong or whatever, because I was doing it in a safe space, but she was like empowering me to make decisions, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Like you weren't fearful of making a mistake. Like she was giving you the support. Yeah. And so like you could make the mistake and be like, okay, that's fine.
And then at the end of it, she's like, great, now go do it. You know, she's like, we've talked through what you thought you should do. You've thought through the scenarios, you know, and it was very much like, you did this, not me, not her, you know, you did it. And I was like, okay. You know, I was still scared to death to go out and do it because I had no idea what the other person was going to say or how they were going to react. But you know, it's little things like that where you can empower people, you know, and like you said, when you do those things, you trust yourself, you become more confident in your competence, you know, and you can kind of move forward. But yeah, to your point, like if you are under leadership that does not give you the freedom to execute in a way you see, the freedom to fail, like, yeah, that's really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
Now, you had also talked to me too about like fitting in to the specific mold, air quote, right? The mold of a woman, especially in HR. You know, kind of talk to me about that mold and how you navigated that.
Oh yeah, totally. Yes. This is something that I still struggle with. So when I, like most like young 20-year-olds, when I got into the workforce, I struggled with like my identity as like an employee and also as like an individual, as a woman. And so I'm grateful that there were some really like inspiring women leaders where I worked at in hindsight. And like so I saw myself as very much like insecure, not like confident in like where I wanted to go with my career, not confident in my education. And like, I often saw HR as kind of like the company police, right? Like sometimes like people don't want to talk to HR. I get it. Like a lot of times, like we do get a bad rep for like years and years of probably incompetent HR, you know, a lot of times. And so, and I think there's this idea that like women are always in HR, and therefore I do feel like our identity gets wrapped up into this very like empathetic, like, oh, that's just HR, or more of like an executive admin. And so like our opinion is not as highly regarded. And so there's like that mold that I saw, which who knows if it's true or not, right? It's my subjective experience. And so like as I developed my career in HR and became like an HR leader, I'm like, how do I break that mold and like have my feedback and like my voice more respected? And two, how do I build more confidence so I don't feel like I'm constantly judging myself, you know, being in HR or being a female in the workplace, you know?
Yeah. I'm thinking a lot just about the breaking the mold, right? And like breaking the stigma, getting outside of the box, right? And being valued as both a woman in the workplace, but also in HR. And I agree with you. I think it is still very challenging these days, right? Especially too, because HR is like the party planners and the fun people, and we bring cupcakes, which is fine and all good and also important. You know, people value those cupcakes when you're in the office.
They definitely do.
Yeah. But I think a lot of it, and I actually talk about this in my episode of Pretty Privilege, where I talk about how women are invited to the room because we are seen as fun, because we are pretty, but our opinions are not necessarily valued. Right.
Right.
And I think there are people out there who absolutely do not do that. And then I think there are people who do that and they have no clue that they're doing that, you know? And it's like, how do you bring awareness to that? And how do you, you know, highlight that, like, I'm not just that pretty face to look at. I actually do have a lot to add here. I have a lot of competence.
Right.
To your point, to break the mold, you know?
Yeah, totally. And I think something that I've learned, and again, this is still like a journey for me, but like when I communicate super clearly, especially to senior leaders who are men, I feel like a little bit more like I'm breaking the mold. I think we tend to, and we've talked about this before, like we tend to soften our language as women, especially in HR, because we sometimes have to deal with very sensitive topics and information. So we do need to have a little bit more softer language. But when it comes to like building an HR function or driving an HR department, or even just giving feedback on a really, really sticky situation, like company policy or issues around policy, I've started to just really like step into the place of like, this is it, like very clearly stating what it is, either back it up by data if I have data to back it up, and just be very clear with what my recommendation is instead of like softening it. Because I feel like a lot of times it isn't softened if it's like a senior marketing executive who's a man, right? So why should I soften my language as a female in HR?
Right. Absolutely. One thing that is kind of itching at my brain is, how is it like, did you feel like you had to mold yourself a certain way when you were in corporate America versus molding yourself now as like the CEO of your own, you know, HR consulting business? Like, what was that like?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So, I had some struggles for sure. So, you know, I felt like I had to be really like docile, really amenable, really, I guess I just had to follow rules more, which of course you do if you're at a company, right? Whether you're in HR or not, there's a company policy. We know we write handbooks, we write policies, but I feel like I had to even bend more so because I was working with a lot of men who were in leadership positions. And I just feel like in being in a corporate setting, there's so many guardrails. There's so many like areas that you have to really consider your communication style, how you dress, how you approach other folks. And so I was stuck in that for a while. I mean, at one of my jobs in HR, I was like the leader of HR. I was told to straighten my hair, and I have very curly hair, as you can see. And I was told I would be more approachable if I did my hair every day. And like, that was, I mean, that was blatant sexism, right? Or maybe not sexism, but like misogyny for sure. And so, and like, this was, yes, more of a senior person in the company than I was, but still like I should have been respected regardless of my role. And I was leading the HR function. So I think like that was hard. Whereas like now as a consultant, like, yes, I run my own business. Like I trust that my clients have partnered with me because they trust that I can do the work. Who cares how curly or straight my hair is or what I look like? And I think in this remote world, what's really nice is us as women can kind of like wear what we want and like do what we need to do to get the work done instead of, like you mentioned, pretty privilege, you know? And like, I feel like corporate America has a lot of pretty privilege and a lot of like bullshit. You have to just play by that game. And I really got sick of playing by the corporate game. I couldn't do it anymore. I literally couldn't do it anymore.
Well, I wish our listeners could like see my face when you talk about, oh, you'd be so much more respected if you had curly hair. Cause that's like eyes wide open, jaw hitting the floor, because it's, statements like that are these statements that if you tell like a normal person, they're like, no, nobody would have really said that to you. But like it does happen. It really happens.
For sure. And
it's just so wild.
It's so wild to me. And so like people, I agree with you. If you tell someone, they'll be like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. That never happened. Or like such a cringe, problematic story. And then when you're like, oh, and also I was HR, it's like, I was the one person you probably shouldn't make that comment to, you know, but because I reported into someone in the C-suite, I had nowhere to go, right? Like, who was I going to say, hey, like, COO, this was said to me? Great, you're HR, you do something about it, you know?
Should have been like, well, you would have been taken more seriously if you had more hair too, sir.
Exactly.
Oh, the things that are said are just wild.
It's crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. But so what advice would you give, you know, to other people who are really trying to work through like the breaking of the mold and kind of just being like, you know what, this isn't for me, and I'm going to go find something that is for me?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel like I'm still in a point of reflection of that too, because consulting, well, it's been about 2 years now, so it's not entirely new to me, but what advice would I give? I think like having some of that experience is helpful, right? Like I definitely wouldn't be here where I am today had I not had bad experiences in corporate America, good experience. Like I definitely wouldn't have, first off, the experience and like the qualifications in HR. Like I'm so grateful some of my companies paid for my SHRM exam and paid for me to like go to UCSD to get additional HR classes. So like I would say there's a little bit, I hate the term paying your dues, but there's a little bit of paying your dues, like do it on the company dime so that if you feel like running your own business is the end goal, like at least get that certificate paid for, get that training paid for, utilize it. And then once you hit a point where you're like, this is really not working for me, like if there's a lot of hoops you just continue have to jump through, like with your personality, with your lifestyle, I think just taking a step back and being like, this isn't working for me. And I know it's a privilege to be able to take a step back and not earn money if you need to reconsider. So like, I know that's not a possibility for everyone, but if you're able to, like, I quit my job because I knew it wasn't a fit and I knew there would be a transition point to like getting my consulting business off the ground. Luckily I had savings and I was able to do this, but that was essential. I was like, this isn't working for me. What is going to work? Am I going to change my field 100%? I do feel like I'm too far down the HR path to change. Whereas like, who cares?
Yeah.
You could change your path, right? Like you could wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what? I don't want to do HR anymore. I'm going to get into engineering. Like, I think we should empower everyone.
Not me, girl. Not engineering. Pick something else.
Like, who knows? Something more fun. Maybe like luxury goods
There you go.
styling. That
All
sounds
about
fun to
that.
me. Yeah.
One thing that you have said, and you've said it twice now, and I meant to hit on it the first time you said it, but we got talking about something else. But you have said like, oh, it's still like the sticky floor moment. I'm still in it, or it's still happening to
Yeah.
me. And the one thing that we are always having sticky floors, right? It may not be the same sticky floor throughout our career, but to me at least, especially now that I'm doing the podcast and talking to all these women, I'm like, me too, me too, me too. I'm like, I feel like a hot mess. Like I'm doing all these things, like I'm hitting on all these sticky floors.
Yeah.
But it's so true that like, just because we're working through it and getting through it doesn't mean that we're not in the sticky floor,
Totally.
And like, I'll even use this podcast as one of them. Like I started this, a month or two ago, and I've never done a podcast before. I don't know how it sounds. I don't, and like, I hate listening to myself on the recordings, and it's cringeworthy for me, but like I do it anyway, because I feel like I love it when I do it. Like it feels right. And I kind of feel like once you can't unring the bell, So like I rung the bell doing the podcast. I love doing it. I love sharing the stories of women, but I'm like nervous about it every time I put one out. I'm like, oh my God, are people going to like it? Do they think it's going to add value? Did I say the very first one I recorded? Y'all can all go back and listen to it. But I talked about Kobe Bryant when it was really supposed to be LeBron James. And I just felt like a total idiot. But I feel like everybody should know that like all of us women who are on this podcast who are talking, like we all have gone through sticky floors. We have our own sticky floors, and we're going to even get like other sticky floors that we can't even imagine going through right now.
Oh, for sure.
Which is why I think it's so great that like you're sharing your sticky floors, because I could hit on one of those next week. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's so powerful that you're sharing that even like now with listeners, like the podcast is still one.
Go back and listen to episode 1. You'll hear it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and listen to episode 1 now. One of my favorite professors in college, all the way back, wow, bringing it back, said like, if you're not nervous, if you're nervous, it's a good sign. And I'm sure other people have said that, and maybe you've heard it before. So I think that's good in terms of the podcast. And so like with me starting a consulting business, I was really nervous, but I knew ultimately it was a better fit than me continuously like hitting my head against a wall trying to fit into corporate culture. Like I have a very strong personality. I've always been told I'm like very outspoken, very bold. Like I'm not very like soft spoken or quiet. And so like that's also been a struggle in HR, because I feel like traditionally people are very like used to these like quiet, demure HR departments, maybe, I don't know, in HR yesteryear. But so yeah, and so like I was nervous I'm still nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I F up big time, I could get sued, right? Like say I don't submit a 401k compliance test, one of my clients could get a huge fee from the IRS, and then like they could turn around and sue me, so there's like or I'm nervous, like did I advise this client on the right thing for this offboarding or this onboarding, so I think like I'm definitely still in that space, which I think is good. But like, I think it's really good to take a step back and be like, okay, why am I nervous? Am I nervous because I messed up? Am I nervous because like this is exciting, but also like a challenge, but also a new opportunity? So yeah, sometimes I'm nervous a lot too. I'm always nervous in like new client meetings too. Like, that's always
I mean, I get it. I'm like, I'm right there with you. Everything you said about like all the audits and everything. It's like, So are there any like challenges that you're facing now? Any like sticky moments that you foresee in your near future?
Ooh, that's a great question. So sticky moments. You know what is a challenge that I'm experiencing now, and I do think it kind of is a sticky floor. So I have a wide variety of clients, right? And so like I am kind of a different HR leader for all of them. Like maybe I'm their de facto, like fractional HR leader. Maybe I'm really just their HR compliance partner, or maybe I'm just like their HR strategy person, right? So what is a challenge is like switching gears so quickly. And sometimes I think like what maybe is a sticky floor, or what holds me back is like thinking to still operate from one space when I have to very quickly change and operate from another space, and then like maybe doubt my expertise, right? Like if I'm focusing on like a really intense performance management overhaul project for a company, like I do question, like, am I an expert in this? I was just doing a handbook like yesterday, or like I was just focusing on building out an HRIS yesterday. What if I really don't know about this? So that's what I think is challenging, to switch gears so quickly and so often, and then also question my experience in certain areas.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then what is next on the horizon, both for you, for your consulting firm? Like, what do you got going on?
So right now I'm in this stage of like trying to plateau with my growth. Like I went from 3 clients to now I have over 10, and it's just me. So I would really love to bring someone on to help support that, and also like get someone who wants to get their feet wet in HR to see if it's a good place for them to grow their career, and also provide them like a different perspective in HR. I think a lot of times we start out in a corporate environment, not helping a consultant. And so it does provide like a different experience for someone building a relationship with a company, giving like an intern the experience of like speaking directly with senior leadership too, I think would be great. So I'd love to like bring someone on for support, but also I think I'm in this place of like, okay, I've scaled this large. How do I be a better consultant? How do I be a better business owner? What are areas like I need to make more efficient? Like I just invested in a new like time recording software, which like never used to be something I thought about, but like I needed to do it. And it's like not that sexy or exciting, but like I had to do it. So yeah. And like affirming my own individual like worth and status of like, yes, I do run this business. I'm confident. I do know this much stuff in HR, but I also have like this huge area that I can further my knowledge, you know, like go to more webinars, focus on things I don't have a lot of experience in. Like there's a lot of areas in HR I do need more experience in.
Yeah. I mean, HR is endless. I tell people there's no way you can be a true expert in all things HR because it's constantly changing all the things. It's wild. Well, one thing I always love to ask is, you know, if you were looking back to the first Lauryn who's like in corporate world, struggling with the 9 to 5, with leaders telling her that, you know, you'd be taken more seriously if you didn't wear your hair curly, you know? What would you tell that Lauryn now that you know what you know?
Oh, I love that question because I think of that Lauryn. Oh, what would I tell her? I would say just keep like, honestly, being true to yourself, you know, like you check in with your gut and you know the best course for you, right? Like be true to yourself in what you say, how you operate, how you're moving forward. Like I would trust the process is so cliche, but back then I remember like going on walks in the middle of the day from my corporate, like from my office. I can like still remember walking up and down in this area and like listening to these podcasts, like yours, right? Like it wasn't around, yours wasn't then, but like hearing all these like female business leaders, and I'd be like, when can I be one of those? When can I do that? Like I'm just stuck as like this HR, like entry level HR, whatever. And I didn't trust myself that I would get here, you know? So I think trusting myself, checking in with myself, and like trusting that I know the best way forward, you know, even if it seems unknown, because all of our paths are unknown, right? Like we don't know. I didn't know I was going to start my HR consulting firm. I had no idea what I was going to do, you know? I was like, I guess I'll just stay in corporate America and be miserable forever.
Oh my gosh. When I think back to like the Erica who was doing corporate wellness, like I never would have thought I'd be in this place doing a podcast. Like what? See? Like that Erica would have laughed at this Erica space, you know?
Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that you say like, you know, trust that you can get there, you know, because why not you? You know, like so many people, and I know myself included, like would always be like, oh, that'll never be me. But like, why not?
Why not? Yeah.
It's no good reason.
Yeah. And like, I think we put these limits on ourselves, but they're fictional, right? Like we just come out of that. We pull them out of thin air. So why can't we pull opportunity out of thin air too? Like just say as quickly as I can say, oh, I can't do that. Well, what if I can, or like, what if I try?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, Lauryn, thank you so much. Last question, because I know people are just going to be
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, I love this girl. I want to like look her up on LinkedIn or wherever, and they're also going to be people who are like, I need some HR help. So where can people find you?
Yeah. So you can go to my website, peoplefirsthrconsulting.co, no M. I'm also on obviously LinkedIn. My name is Lauryn Pregoni, but I would say definitely go to my website, People First HR Consulting. And if you have any question about HR, big, small, problematic or non-problematic, feel free to message me.
Yeah. And I will put all of that in the show notes too, so that, they can just click it and it'll take them right there. But thank you so much. It's been so great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's like an honor. I really appreciate it.
It's been so fun. I appreciate it.